Welcome into the Inside Baseball Podcast Network. Lindsay Crosby, joined by Inside the Cardinals managing editor Christian Rauh, talking about the St. Louis Cardinals and JJ Wetherholt, first round pick, number 7 overall. Uh, Christian, what was the reaction to getting a guy who, going into this year, was seen as a potential number 1 overall pick? And yet, not only did you get him at pick number 7, he came in just barely over slot, getting $6.9 million to sign with the Cardinals.
Yeah, if you would have told me at the beginning of the season that, hey, you're going to get the guy that was projected to go number 1 overall in the draft for the entire offseason, you're going to get him at 7. Oh, and you're not going to have to overspend to get him. I'd be completely shocked, especially how the way that the past couple of drafts has gone for the Cardinals. So really excited to see that JJ Wetherholt is a Cardinal. I think it's a good fit for him. He was drafted as a shortstop. I do think he's going to eventually wind up being a second baseman. That's where he played most of his stuff last year at West Virginia University. This year, the stats weren't that great, but he did deal with a lot of injuries, a lot of hamstring injuries. He had 2 of them that kept him out for some time. But I'll tell you what, Lindsay, I think this guy fits the scheme of the Cardinals. I think he is going to be a great asset because he can play the middle infield at both sides. I think there's a really exciting future story that you can see Mason Wynn and JJ Wetherholt taking care of that middle infield. And the hit tool. He's one of the MLB.com, MLB Pipeline called him one of the best pure hitters in the draft class. And if you look at his stuff, you watch his videos, you see his tapes, it's hard to disagree with that.
Yeah, I think the quality of the hit tool was a big thing because it felt like, for the longest time, kind of watching from the outside, you saw a lot of struggles with this lineup, in particular with making good contact. You have a guy, Nolan right now playing second base. I believe he's batting under 200. You have some struggling stars as well, and we can kind of get into that because we're talking about the infield with JJ Wetherholt, but Paul Goldschmidt, Nolan Arenado have both struggled this season. Arenado wasn't an all-star for the first time in, I believe, close to a decade. Paul Goldschmidt is batting 225. It's a situation where what's going on here? And do you think there's a chance that they can turn it around enough to keep St. Louis in this wild card spot that they have right now?
Man, that's a really interesting question. And when you look at where the Cardinals sit right now, they are currently sitting second in the wild card standings, right behind the Atlanta Braves for the National League. But if you look at their run differential, they're negative run differential. Their expected win total is about 6 or 7 games lower. I take you back to the 2018 Seattle Mariners, where they were leading the division in the American League West against the Houston Astros at the trade deadline last year in 2018. They were flying. They were doing a fantastic job, and they wound up getting 8 games behind the wild card, 8 games behind the wild card, and missing the playoffs because their run differential wasn't there. They just weren't performing the way they needed to. The Cardinals kind of make me throw those red flags up that looking at that same kind of season, because they are winning very close games. You want to call that luck, call it whatever you want, but they're not doing it in an interesting style. The pitching, who knows how long that's going to last? There's some fairly old pitching on this squad, and some of their pitching has not been great as of late. Their ace, Sonny Gray, has had a lot of issues in these last couple outings. But going back to that infield, I know it kind of did a whole circle here. So going back to that infield, JJ Wetherholt, I think, will be an interesting fit when he does make his way up. But if you're looking at what they're doing right now, Nolan Gorman, as you mentioned, sitting at that second base spot, he's hit a lot of home runs, leading the team in home runs, but he's also leading the entire league, set for a historic record of a strikeout rate in the season. He is on pace to have more strikeouts than any other person in the history of the league in one season. So something that is not good. So yes, you hit home runs. Are you excited when that happens? Absolutely, especially when you're coming out of the 8 hole. But this is a guy that you want to see batting 4th or 5th when he's on. But he's not doing that because of a lot of the strikeouts. Nolan Arenado, finally seeing some kind of progression out of him. He did well in the doubleheader this past weekend, hit a home run. He is batting 280 in his last 7 games, which is great. Slugging's up to about 400 in that same span, but he had a rough first half of the season. If he can get going this year for the second half, that is absolutely crucial for the St. Louis Cardinals. And then for the first time since 2012, Lindsay, Paul Goldschmidt went down farther than fifth in the batting order on Sunday against the Atlanta Braves. He bats seventh. 2012, that was his second year in the league. Bat seventh, his first at bat at seventh. I think he took it personally. Go ahead and cue that Michael Jordan meme, if you will, because he hit a home run. They were laughing in the dugout afterwards. I'm pretty sure he was probably saying that, hey, he makes a pretty good seventh batter. So I don't know. I'm interested to see what's going to happen with these two veterans in the corner infielder spots, because for the last few years, they have been the cornerstones of this team. Even when Adam Wainwright, Yadi Molina were there, they were the people that kept them going and got them into the playoffs. And that's just not being the case right now. There's other people stepping up, Mason Wynn being one of those, which is having an outstanding season. I think if it wasn't for the amount of talent sitting in the National League at the shortstop position, I think you could have easily made an argument for him being an all-star this season. But the middle infield, I think, is going to be the biggest question of, can the Cardinals sustain and continue on for the season this year? And it's going to start with those two veterans on the outside.
Yeah, they're going to have to do better. And kind of back to your run differential point that you made a minute ago, it reminds me of the 2023 Miami Marlins, right? Who had a negative run differential, but they extremely outperformed their expected record in one-run games. And that's what powered them into a wild card berth. They got into the postseason and just got whacked. And then obviously this year, they've been significantly worse. And the Cardinals aren't as extreme in one-run games. They're 18-13 right now. They have a +5 run differential in one-run games. But overall, to your point, it's a negative 31 run differential. And so they have a .525 winning percentage, but that's the profile of a team with a win percentage in the 400s. So getting some more reliable offense, and like you said, from those corner infield spots, that feels like the key to me. The big question I have for you is, what happens at the trade deadline? Is there a possibility, since Paul Goldschmidt is in the final year of his deal, if he gets hotter recently down in the seventh hole, do they trade him and look to acquire somebody with multi-years of control to move forward, or just fill that hole internally? What happens at the trade deadline?
I'm probably going to say the most cringe thing you probably could think of, but that doesn't seem like the Cardinal way, if you will, Lindsay, to trade Paul Goldschmidt at the deadline, one of those veterans that have been there. Do I think it would be a good idea? Especially when I'm seeing, the concerns of this team with their run differential, as you mentioned. I'm pretty sure there's only been one team in the history of MLB. Don't quote me, but I'm pretty sure I read this, that there's only been one team with a negative run differential to win the World Series. But Paul Goldschmidt, I think it would be a good idea to get him to an actual contender and move him on and build up the farm moving forward. Now, I'm not sure if this is going to be John Mozeliak's last season into the system. I know there's been some talks that maybe he's going to be stepping down after this season. If that's the case, I think that they're going to do exactly what most fans think they're going to do. They're going to buy at the deadline. They're going to add a couple pieces and they're going to go for it. And they're going to try to let him right out to the sunset. And that's going to include having Paul Goldschmidt on that squad. You also are bringing people back, possibly, hopefully, Tommy Edman coming back. He did just have another setback with his injury. So eventually he might be coming back. That's a huge add. He was slated to play center field this year, but Michael Ciani's doing a fantastic job, although his bat still not heated up the way it used to, but it's hard to take him out of the lineup with his defense being as good as it is. And then you still have the overwhelming question of what to do with Jordan Walker. I know that there is a lot of people questioning, should they trade Jordan Walker, maybe give him a different change of scenery from the Cardinals organization, because there's just so much talent and potential there. It does seem like that's not going to happen, but hey, we still have 8 days left in the deadline.
Yeah, it's I don't envy trying to figure out for the Cardinals what to do. Obviously, you can't punt on the season right now, but we've seen teams go on hot streaks before the deadline and decide to buy when they shouldn't have. I'm thinking the Angels last year. We've seen teams go cold right before the deadline and make the decision to sell. So, really important stretch coming up here for the Cardinals. We'll see what happens. Now that they're finished with Atlanta, Pittsburgh Pirates, Washington Nationals, Texas Rangers take us into the deadline. We'll see what happens. You can get all of this and more inside thecardinals.com.